Greetings. Let's talk for a moment. So one of the things that comes up a lot in conversation in the SCA is discussion of belts. Of course, we use the phrase belt or belted as a colloquialism for members of the chivalry. And they, of course, are denoted by, among other things, a white belt, or in some cases, a white baldric, a leather belt or fixture that goes from shoulder to hip. But that's not the only thing we talk about belts with. So just want to do a quick rundown of what different belts can mean, which ones are hard and fast symbols that you don't ever want to use, and which ones are traditional but not official. So let's start off with the white belt. That's probably the most common nomenclature in the society with regards to peerage. Now, as you probably know, the peers are the pelicans, the laurels, the masters of defense, and the chivalry, which are the knights and the masters at arms. A member of the chivalry, there are several items that denote members of the chivalry. In Onstiora, of course, the gold chains represent fealty, and knights, because they represent a mounted combatant, have spurs. Different kingdoms may have different traditions there, so don't hold it as hard and fast, but there is one insignia that is set into law, and that is the white belt. And that is a white, unadorned belt that, of course, goes around a person's waist. That means they are a member of the chivalry, specifically a knight. A baldric, a white baldric, which goes shoulder to hip, is a historical fixture, first of all. Baldrics were how most swords or belted weapons were worn, because an actual belt wouldn't necessarily carry the weight properly, so you'd wear it as a strap that goes shoulder to hip. But in the SCA, a white belt means knight, and a white baldric means master at arms. And the difference between the two, they are both peers, they are co-equal. A knight, however, has sworn fealty to the crown, where a master at arms has sworn, a little bit of differences here, but my understanding is that master at arms has sworn loyalty to the kingdom. Someone else a little more familiar can check me on that. Masters at arms are not terribly common in Onstiora, so I don't have the widest exposure to them. I'll freely admit that. But that's not the only belts that we see used as insignia. There are three other belts. Now, these belts are designed, or how shall we say, intended to represent a relationship between the person wearing them and a instructor or master in this case. Now, these insignia are not protected by any law. They are not reserved in hard and fast rules, as it were, but they are highly traditional. And before anyone plays the inevitable game of, well, it's not a law, so it's not something they can enforce, I'd like to humbly point out, if you were to wear, mundanely, a six-pointed star, also known as the Star of David, that's not a protected charge, there's no law preventing you from wearing it, but people will make some reasonable assumptions about you wearing that star, and they may not be accurate, and you would receive inordinate amounts of social pressure if you were wearing it inappropriately. Another possible insignia, suppose you were to display the eagle, globe, and anchor. That is not restricted. There's no law saying you can't display it. But if you were to display it inappropriately, I think every Marine in the United States and a lot of Marine families and retired Marines would glower at you heartily for misusing that insignia if you were trying to display it for any purpose other than possibly saying you were or a member of your family was in the military and the Marine Corps. So please understand that the fact something is not protected in hard and fast black letter law does not mean it is not traditionally protected for its use. So just keep that in mind as we go forward. The first belt, again, probably the second most commonly talked about that we're going to discuss here, is the red belt. And red belt is used as a noun a lot in the SCA. They are a red belt, he is a red belt, she is a red belt, whatever the case may be. Now, a red belt is a student to a member of the chivalry. Specifically, a red belt is a squire to a knight. And I understand that there is a red baldric of sorts for students to Masters of Arms. Again, on Steelard doesn't have a lot of Masters of Arms, so I don't have that type of exposure. But we were going to concentrate on red belts for a minute. A red belt is a student, and that means that they are officially studented to a knight. Now, what does that mean? Is that a rank? No. Squire is not a rank. It's a description. You would never say someone is Squire so-and-so, is so-and-so. Aldrich de Kerr, for example, Squire to Count Barnes Silveraxe. It's a description. It is not a rank. It is not a title. But how is this important to us who aren't squires? Well, here's a reason why. If you see someone doing something outstanding or amazing or selfless and you want to thank them, one of the options is, if they are wearing a red belt, you would ask them, who is your knight? And then you tell them, thank you for doing whatever it is you're doing. Word fame is important in the SCA, so this is a very real thing. But also, you would tell their knight. You would say, who is your knight? And they would say, give you the knight's name. And you could endeavor to reach out to that knight. And I have done this. I have done this plenty of times with all of the peerages. But that relationship, when you are wearing a red belt, part of the relationship is a public display that you are a student of this individual person. Now, some belts have the arms of the master usually on the tip of the belt. Some don't. That's not a hard and fast rule. Traditionally, it should be an unadorned red belt as well, but like I said, there's not a law about that. It's just tradition. So if you see someone absolutely rocking it on the battlefield or in the tournament field, or you see someone who is, giving selflessly in the kitchen, doing dishes, sweeping the floors, helping to load cars, and they have a red belt on, it is not inappropriate. First of all, it's definitely not inappropriate to thank them for their work. I mean, let's be absolutely clear. If you want to thank someone, thanking them is appropriate. But it is not inappropriate to say, thank you very much. By the way, who is your knight? I would like to pass word on to them of your good work. That is absolutely appropriate. So, moving on, there is another belt, of course, and that is the green belt. Again, same basic rule, an unadorned green belt. Usually a very vibrant green, but there's no set tone. I've seen some that are very subdued. Now, that is an apprentice. An apprentice, of course, is a student to a laurel, and this is, in broad terms, because laurel is a very all-encompassing topic in many respects. A student in the field of arts and sciences. Again, the same type of relationship. The wearing of a green belt is a public display. You want other people to actively know that you are formally studented to a master laurel. And again, the same rules apply. If you see someone who is absolutely amazing in the work they do, or is doing great service, or is even doing something outside of that field. Suppose, there are plenty of apprentices I know who also fight and will go out and will just rock it on the battlefield. It is not in the least inappropriate to walk up to someone and, again, thank them and congratulate them for an excellent work they're doing, or their contributions, or how amazing they were. These are all appropriate things to say, and you want to say them to the person. You want that positive feedback. But there's nothing wrong at all with saying, and who is your laurel? I want to tell them as well. They deserve to know this. So that belt, it's kind of an open invitation for someone to ask you, who is your master there? So that, of course, is the yellow belt. Now, the last belt that we talk about is the yellow belt, which on this I can offer visual aid because I wear a yellow belt, and that is a protege. And again, it's the same type of relationship. A protege, like myself, is formally studented to a master pelican, which again, that makes me a student in the services. Now, what does services entail? That kind of goes back to the discussion of what the peerages are. But service is, of course, a huge umbrella term. It is, nominally speaking, anything that benefits others with little direct return to yourself, and that's an off-the-cuff definition. If you ask 10 pelicans what the definition of service is, you'll get 12 answers. I've tried this. It's a true thing. So, but again, if you see someone doing something service-related or any of the amazings, I mean, let's just be fair. If someone is wearing a yellow belt and they are doing good service, or they are doing good arts and sciences, or they are out there killing it on the battlefield, I mean, take your pick. Anytime they're doing amazing and you want to compliment them, you absolutely should compliment them. You were doing a great job. It was amazing talking with you. You do great. Any of those things. You know, it's always good to give people feedback. But if you're telling someone this, and you notice they have a yellow belt, it is absolutely appropriate to follow up that statement with a question of, and who is your peer? Who is your pelican? They deserve to know this as well. So those are the 3 belts. Now, of course, as we know, there are 4 peerages. There is the Master of Defense, the Rapier Peerage. Now, they don't have belts. The MODs, or mods in the modern vernacular, the abbreviation online MOD, have a white collar that they wear, or mantle. I've heard a couple different phrases. And for the longest time, there was a while after they were first established where there wasn't even a formalized name for their students. But the tradition that I have seen now, and if someone knows different, or if your kingdom does this differently, please tell me. Please, in the comments down below, tell me. As I said, the Master of Defense wears a white collar with an MOD medallion on it, and their students, I believe the term is now provosts. I've not met too many, and I don't know too many of the titles, but that's what I've heard, have a red collar. Again, kind of following in the color scheme from the chivalry of a white belt and a red belt for the squires. So the Masters of Defense have a red mantle that they wear. Now, what does this mean for them? It's the exact same thing. If you see someone absolutely killing it, absolutely nailing it in anything, absolutely you should pay them a compliment. You should let them know that their good work, their good deeds, their good service, their excellent prowess on the battlefield, whatever, is being noticed. It's absolutely okay at the end of that comment to go, and who is your peer? Who is your Master of Defense? Who is your knight? Who is your pelican? Who is your laurel? Whoever. And say, who are they? They deserve to know this as well. Now, can someone wear 3 belts and a collar? There's no rule against it. And in fact, I do know people that do wear multicolored belts because they are in fact a protege to one person and a squire to another, or a protege and an apprentice, or a squire and apprentice. Can you do all that and still wear the red collar of provost to a Master of Defense? Yes, you can. That's, you should not think you're expected to do that, and there's nothing saying you're limited to one. There's nothing saying you have to pursue more, but understand that you can absolutely be studented in one form or another to multiple people. So again, what does the collar and all the belts mean? Those are student relationships, the exception, of course, the white belt. That's the master. That's the denotion for the master rank. And those are what they mean. Now, let's go ahead and talk about the underbelly of this conversation. We've talked about word fame, and you deserve to know, your master deserves to know the good work you're doing. The inverse of that is true. If someone is doing something less than good, I'm just going to be as vague about this as possible because I don't want to sully this conversation into a deep dive of horrible things. But if someone is doing something that does need to be addressed, it is absolutely appropriate when you are talking to them about this to say, I want to know who your peer is because they need to hear about this. And that's a much larger conversation. If you're new to the SCA, you definitely would not want to pull that particular card out off the cuff. But understand that the student relationship is a two-way relationship for good and for ill. Students, like myself, we don't take these belts to show off how good we are and how good our peers are. We take these belts for encouragement and correction. When we make a mistake, when we step out of line, it's understood that our peer will step in and will coach us, counsel us about where we need to improve, and that's part of the belt. So a little bit more there than just the belts, but understand belts have meanings, belts have implications in those cases. Now, are there any other color belts that are reserved? No. The only one that's actually hard reserved is the white belt. That is protected. An unadorned white belt is a denotion of a knight, and that's not something that you're allowed to wear unless you're a knight. And if you were wearing a white belt, if you wear one accidentally, like you have a woven cloth belt that went well with your garb and you didn't think about it, I've seen that happen a couple times. It's not unreasonable. You will probably be pulled aside by a ranking member at an event and told, hey, that's what this means. You probably need to take that off if you can. No big deal there. For the others, if you're wearing a yellow belt or a red belt or a white belt, or if you're wearing a yellow belt, a green belt, or a red belt, and you're not a student, you're going to get a lot of questions. And you're probably going to get explained to that you shouldn't be wearing that unless you're actually studented. But it's not a hard set law. So there are differences. So that is the conversation for today. I hope you enjoyed. If you have any questions or feedback, because I know every kingdom does things a little differently, feel free to leave a comment down below. Until then, I look forward to seeing you all at the next event. Goodbye, and God bless.